first and foremost, congratulations. I saw your junior B number got raised to the rafters. What was that like?
You know what? I was supposed to go down for that, and then all the fires started out here in Kelowna, so I ended up getting pushed back. I got to go out on the 20th and do the function out at a home game of theirs.
Did you ever think when you were playing junior B that it would come to a day where your number's getting retired? That's insane.
Yeah, I did not think that was going to be a thing, but that's a great organization in junior B up there in Beaver Valley. They're great people. Still keep in touch with the coach there. Obviously, it's the same guy that was there when I was there, and super special thing they're doing for me there. I definitely didn't see it coming though.
What have you been up to these days?
Coaching U7 hockey. It's a lot of fun. I got 2 boys in it this year. My little guy's 4, and my middle child Gunnar is 6. So they're both in it this year. Turned into a landscaper, taking care of the yard, doing a little bit of that. I don't know, nothing too crazy. It's really took a break after I finished playing. I mean, Hutz knows how busy it is when you're in it, and then having 3 young kids, we had our kids back to back. I got my daughter Sutton 7, and then I got my son Gunnar at 6, and then Jet at 4. But he's really only like 14 months apart, so they're all real close. So once I finished playing, I was like, I'm taking a minute and helping my wife out here for a little bit, and I'll pick it back up in a minute. But still kind of in that mode a little bit, and took up skiing last winter, which was a lot of fun for the people watching. Not good at that. So that took me a hot minute to figure out, but had a lot of fun with that. Just trying to do a couple new things and spend time with the kids and family and make up for some lost minutes.
That's good. So Franny, like now, decompressing a bit from the game, I think something that I've done working with some kids, and now it's like there's so much pressure on these young kids, right? Like I even work with a U16 goalie, and it's like the end of the world. You didn't get drafted, or you get drafted, and your experience, the road you took. What's like advice now that you take away from your career, where it's like it's so much pressure now to be good young and like get there right away, but like looking back on your career, like there's probably so many different things that made you who you were. Like how do you help this next generation like through your experience?
Well, I mean, when you're coming up going through it, like that kid, the Bantam draft is everything. You go into it, and if you don't get drafted, I remember I was crushed when I didn't get drafted either. But knowing what I know now, it's like you really got to try and put a little less emphasis on that, because all it means is you just got to show out at a camp. You can be a walk-on, or you can be a listed kid and still make it. The game nowadays, it's like, well, if you don't play at an academy and you don't get drafted, you don't have a shot. You hear that all the time. The academies have become such a force in minor hockey programs and things like that. And I get it to an extent. I got a cousin that scouts for Everett, and he's like, yeah, those kids get definitely a lot more looks than the general, but every kid develops at a different time. There's nothing that says you still can't do it, your more generic way. So from the Bantam draft standpoint, I think there really does need to be a little less emphasis from kids. I know it's hard to do, but I mean, I wasn't drafted, Webbs wasn't drafted. There's a lot of guys that ended up making a junior team that weren't actually drafted in the Bantam draft. So, I feel for kids kind of going through that right now. I got a buddy back home whose son just went through it, and he was fortunate enough to get drafted out of Sycamoose. But it's definitely a process for those kids, and definitely a moment in time that I don't forget going through.
Yeah, it really is interesting, because I was having this conversation the other day, and I'm an 89 born. Like perception in life, how it changes. Like I find him telling stories to people like back in my day, and I'm only like 34, but I think it really puts life into perspective, Cody, when it's like you're that age, and I didn't play high level hockey. I was actually more of a baseball player, but you're that age. You're always looking to the future. Like everything in life, you're looking to the future. And now I find myself wanting to be in the present. So like, that's the biggest advice I think anybody can give to like a younger generation or younger players, like live in the moment, right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. It's funny. I run around out in the backyard with my son, and literally we were playing road hockey back there yesterday, and we're cruising around. He looks at me and goes, "Dad, you're 36. Like, you're old. I'm like, you know, you can't help but laugh, right? But it's, you know, that's one of the joys, being able to kind of step back for a minute, enjoy the kids, and be able to take that kind of stuff in. You know, it's been a lot of fun. You know, and Huts, like you said, you worked with that goalie that was 16. The last couple of years I played in the AHL, and I was kind of tasked with that like Reggie Dunlop role. You know, where it's kind of like player coach a little bit, and you know, they would give me their defense prospect that they had down there, and it was like, you know, here, you get them for 40 games, you know, get them going, get them doing the right things, you know, making the right reads, right habits, all that other kind of stuff. And I actually ended up loving that role. You know, you know, you get to that point where, you know, even though you're playing well, like that call's not coming, like you're not going back up. So you're really trying to find a way to be as useful as possible for those organizations, right? And I ended up thoroughly enjoying that role. And like you said, it's quite rewarding getting to be able to work with kids after you're done, and trying to share your wisdom a little bit, help them turn a corner. And especially when you see them succeed after you've tried to help them, it's pretty rewarding.
Yeah, I agree. That's like something I think for me, when my last year in Arizona working with Veggie and Veg Milk, obviously he's a great goalie, and being heard, and just like I was there every single day, and they liked me because of the rapport they have. And that's an honor to you, right? Like they had you there because it wasn't just for your hockey, right? Obviously that's a priority as well. You could play, but they knew you were a good guy, and they knew what you could bring to the room. And what I want to circle back to, we played in a lot of the same markets, right? Buffalo, you know, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Not really, I didn't really play in Toronto. I was there, but I showered with them. We went over that, but and then in Nashville. But so like I got traded to Toronto, and that wasn't my only really trade. Like I changed markets all the time using free agency. So it was one of those things that I like slowly got into, right? Where I remember the deal in Nashville, like you come back to Nashville, it's a familiar locker room, but you come from playing in Toronto and now you're like right with us. It was right during the playoff hunt. Like, what is that like? Family, friends, life, hockey. I feel like that's such a big move.
Yeah. You know what? That was a tough transition. There's so many things that go into it. I mean, when that happened, we kind of had an idea that it might, but you never really know when it's actually coming. So, you know, I remember getting that call. Sorry, my computer's going crazy here.
No problem.
I remember getting that call, and it was like 8 a.m. after a game in Philly. And, you know, it was Nonis calling me, hey, we traded you. And then it was, you know, we had to wait for the immigration papers, so I ended up getting stuck in Toronto for a few days and not being able to like go in and work out with the team because you're not part of that team anymore. You can't skate, you know, and then it ended up taking like 4 or 5 days or something like that. And then you get into, we met you guys on the road on the island, I want to say. And you got to try and pick up new system. You got to figure out who you're playing with and all the things that go with it, right? So let alone you don't have any of your same gear. You know, you're grabbing stuff out of the back that's brand new and not your fit. And, you know, it's a pretty uncomfortable process. But I mean, the family side of it, you know, my wife stayed in Toronto for a week or whatever and packed up, and then met me in Nashville a little later. We didn't have kids at that point, so didn't have to deal with that aspect, but that definitely makes things a little trickier. I know guys that have gone through that, and there's a lot of moving parts that go into it when you get traded like that. But I think the other thing that gets maybe a little overlooked in those scenarios is the role change that goes along with a trade like that. You know, typically most guys go into a situation where they're playing the same type role that they were when they got traded. And, you know, for me, that was a tough transition going from playing, you know, north of 20 minutes a night in Toronto and on the first unit power play and all that other kind of stuff. And then going to Nashville where, you know, we're stacked on D on the right side. I mean, the D were Weber, Ellis, and Seth Jones on the right side. And now you're like, well, what's going to happen here? Like, what are we doing? And, you know, you go from playing north of 20 to down to 15 and second unit power play where you're, you know, having to sit there and then try and go out and make plays with 20 seconds left. And, you know, you end up sitting there a lot longer when you're not used to it. And, you know, being able to do stuff like that is something that you kind of learn along the way, and it takes some practice. You know, it's like going in cold with 10 minutes left in a game. Like, it's not easy to just get out there and make a play. It's obviously part of the job, so you got to do it. But I think that's part of one of the things that gets overlooked when guys get traded is how their roles changing, because that takes a minute to get used to.
I would say King West going to Lower Broadway, a bit of an easier move, right?
Yeah.
Hey, how much? I was going to ask you, on a scale of 1 to Jay Rosehill, how much do you miss the Toronto media?
Oh man, you know what? I missed everything about that city, to be honest, man. Like, I loved it there. I wish I could have played the rest of my career there. The media side never bothered me all that much. I mean, to this day, I'm still a guy that doesn't have social media, so I was able to kind of drown out the noise, I guess you call it, and it never really affected me all that much. We went through some tough times in Toronto. Don't get me wrong. It's not easy facing that scrum some nights, for sure. There was one night where I think it was Simmons came in when it was getting close to the time where Randy Carlisle was let go, and he came in and asked if we were playing to get him fired. Like, a question like that you don't really see coming, and I accidentally swore on the camera, and I apologized to all the guys in the media and the girls that were there in the media afterwards. But don't get me wrong, it's hard to deal with the media there when times are tough sometimes, but in terms of letting it affect my experience there or how I was playing, I was able to manage that quite well, to the point where I really enjoyed it there. Yeah.
I was going to say, not to rehash old scars, but 2013, like, people forget you scored 2 goals in that game, man. You're an onion bag for the Leafs in that game. Like, how often does that game come up when you like walk on the street or at camp or something like that?
You know what? Like, it's kind of one of those things where it never really gets discussed, because it's like everybody feels how brutal that was.
I'm the asshole, Franny.
No.
Somebody's got to do it.
Comes up, it's like, yeah, you were there, right? It's like, yep, I was definitely there. The worst part about that, for like me personally, is when I look back at my career now being done, I don't know that I had ever played better hockey than that season and in that playoff round. That playoff round was probably the best hockey I had ever played, and I was just like Hut says, when you're in a zone and you're feeling it and things are just going well, and you feel like there's nothing that can, kind of crack you. And that was a moment in my career where I definitely kind of had that feeling. And it's always like the coulda, woulda, shoulda. We would have had, I think it was the Rangers up after that, and we played them well that season. And you can kind of see the pathway had you got through Boston. I mean, that team was so good, and we weren't supposed to, really give them a run, but we were right there. We should have finished it. And definitely a scar that is still there, but it's like anything else with time. It is what it is.
Yeah, the beauty and the pain of team sports, right? No matter how good you're feeling, sometimes especially the way we're, right? You're a D-man goalie. We make mistakes. Sometimes it's bad or whatever. Even when you're playing good, right? It's one of those things. You're a product of your surroundings. But it was, a hell of a career, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, I don't have any regrets. It was, I mean, you look at how much effort kids put into getting there, and how much effort we put into getting there. I mean, really, at the end of the day, you're just fortunate to be able to hang around as long as you can hang around, right?
Yep, definitely on that front. I just want to change the focus a bit to like this day and age of hockey, the modern day hockey, and nothing's really changed, quite frankly, since you left Toronto, man. Like, the pressure is just so firmly on this team. There's a couple extra superstars on the roster, but what do you make of this current iteration of the Toronto Maple Leafs? Obviously, a substantial change. Kyle Dubas gone, Brad Tree living in. And where do you stand in the debate, analytics versus team toughness? Because that's something they addressed this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, the NHL is a copycat league. Tampa ran the regular season for however many years that was. Like, it wasn't even close. And then through the playoffs, they got tougher. The game changes in the playoffs. It gets tighter, it gets harder, and definitely more physical. And I think there's always going to be a place in the game for size. Like, everybody talks about you need more speed, you need more skill, you need to score more goals. Like, yeah, that's all great, but in the playoffs, when everything gets hard, at the end of the day, you always need some size. So I think the avenue that they've gone and getting some guys with some grit that can play those minutes and come in and make a difference in a series when it gets hard, I think is an important move. And I mean, I'm still a massive Leafs fan. You know, I grew up a Leafs fan. That was my dream come true. And, you know, I mean, that team's changed so much from when I was there. I think Riley's the only guy that's still left there, but I shoot him a text every once in a while and, you know, just kind of wish them good luck in the playoffs or whatever, because I know what it's like when they're going through that, dealing with those pressures. Like, that's not easy. Those guys are under a ton of pressure to perform there. And, you know, it's one of those things, like it's always just so close. You know, you can kind of see the pathway for those guys had they got through that one, you know, game or whatever. And I definitely feel for them when it doesn't work out. And I'm hopeful that it works out for them this year.
Man, you talked about the pathway in that Boston series. Automatically, I thought to last year, they got the Florida Panthers in the second round. They shit the absolute bed, right? Where it seemed like everything was finally the puck bounces were going their way in the first round. And that's just a game of hockey. It's tough to win. I mean, you guys know better than me how difficult it truly is to win in this league. And I'm happy you brought up the name Morgan Rielly, man, because like that's one player I can't talk crap about. Like, I think he does so much for this team. Everything I know about him in the room, he's an absolute stud, just a quality human being. What was it like to play with Morgan Rielly?
He's the best, man. Like, that kid came in as a rookie when we were there, and he was a stud right from the start. You could put him out there in any situation, and he'd be fine. Like, being young, inexperienced, whatever, for him, it didn't matter. You know, he was that good. And he's a great person. Like, he's one of my favorite teammates of all time. You know, I'll never forget at my wedding, he was like the all-star at my wedding. You know, but you know, he's one of those guys that cares about his teammates, like, to a fault. And you know, he's an absolute core piece for those guys in that dressing room. He's what it is to be a leader, I think. And, you know, I'm in the same category as you. Anytime anybody says something like, oh, I think they need an offensive guy, or I'm like, you guys have Morgan Rielly. Like, have you not watched? You know, like, that kid is as good as there is. And they're like, well, you know, I had a conversation. I can't remember exactly who it was with, but they're like, oh, we need the big booming shot. I'm like, you've got Marner on one side and Matthews on the other. Like, you need a booming shot when you're trying to set up like a Weber on the one flank. Like, all you need is a guy to just sift pucks through and distribute it. Yeah. Like, if you're trying to take heavy shots from the top, those guys, I would imagine, aren't going to be thrilled with not getting the puck on the inside. Like, those are your playmakers making tons of money, and really you just need to be able to distribute out there and accomplish what needs to be accomplished. I think Morgan Rielly is an unbelievable hockey player, and it's exactly what that team needs.
I'm not just saying this. He could go down as one of the more undervalued players in the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And everybody's talking about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, but like Morgan Rielly and Tessa Virtue, that's a real couple right there.
I love it. I love it. They're good people, and anytime I get a chance to run into Mo outside, it's always a time I look forward to.